Hello there. Have you ever desired the wealth of a small country? Do the words like union and ethical responsibility scare you? Have you ever wanted to make bank on the stock market but missed out on the GameStop gravy train? Well, oh boy do I have the game for you. Capitalism 2 is a nearly 20-year-old game that is quite literally the standard for the entire business simulation genre. Now, that isn't to say that the game is the second coming of Christ or literally so good it's like the Minecraft or Fortnite of the genre, just that it was basically one of the last good games released before the entire genre got thrown into the dustbin of history. Which is mostly because games like Minecraft and Fortnite don't require an undiagnosed case of narcissistic sociopathy to be fun. And rather than going to a therapist, you can instead put that energy into managing logistics, imports and exports, manufacturing, retail storefronts, marketing, purchases and sales, research and development, employee indoctrination, and more. In Capitalism 2, you play the role of a spoiled trust fund kitty with the goal of trying to make daddy proud of you for once in your silver spoon life. The tools at your disposal are legion, from creating monopolies over Earth's limited but profitable precious resources, playing the stock market until you blow up your account like Melvin Capital, taking over the media to spread anti-Marxist propaganda, brand awareness, or even simply buying your competitors' products, stamping your Proud American Corporation Inc. LLC logo on it, then selling it for twice the price to the smooth-brained manlets around the city. This is truly one of the greats, even if my childhood nostalgia wasn't shining through on deep display. Now, as a game from the mid-2000s, the biggest hurdle is the graphics, because while the map itself has a timeless, retro-like design, the rest of the art in this game is, to put it bluntly, the UI is garbage, the color scheme is trash, and the portraits are so deep in that uncanny valley that if they dug any deeper, they would fall into hell itself. But the gameplay itself is pretty fun, so it probably all evens out. Somehow. #nostalgia. Now, being a business simulator, the main objective of the game is to acquire as much money as possible, as fast as possible, and either blow it all building a swag mansion, or hoarding it until you die so that the poorest don't get any. The objective of the game is to build up an industrial base to produce the products that you then sell to the people to make their miserable lives just a bit more bearable. There are also multiple competitors that are trying to do the same thing as you, and will almost always overtake you and leave you in the dust if you don't abuse the libertarian wet dream world that this game takes place in. For you see, while there are plenty of local governments, you have been very generous with your campaign contributions, ensuring that almost nothing will stop the rise of late-stage capitalism. This means that the easiest and quickest ways to make money are to create unbreakable monopolies over the raw resources that let the system run. For example, you'd think that trees would be common in empty virgin lands. But you'd be wrong. In this alternate reality 1990s, there are about 2 trees left in the entire world, and with just a small loan of $100 million, you can be their sole owner. As people generally need beds and chairs, and since science has found 0 alternative methods of building them without using wood, your rivals will have no choice but to buy your pure American handcrafted designer sheets of patriotic timber for some outrageous prices. However, you always need to stand vigilant for any goody two-shoes environmentalists who, tired of living life in a smog-filled wasteland, have the audacity to plant another tree, shattering your monopoly before it even starts. However, there is a silver lining, because the more timber you can harvest, the more money you can extract from coke-addled bankers. For you see, in the real world, assets are generally calculated based on what they cost to make, not what you're charging for them. To put it in another way, if it costs you $10 to make a wooden horse toy, but you decide to try selling it for $1 billion, you can't then use it as collateral to get a $10 billion loan, because the price you're charging for it is not an accurate assessment of its real-world value. This elementary concept is too complicated for the loan department at your local Wells Fargo, who are happy to finally have a real customer for once. So by placing all that timber you just harvested into a warehouse, you can raise the selling price to the maximum the game will let you, and then use that warehouse full of worthless wood as collateral for actual cash. A lot of cash, in fact. You can then repeat this process with coal, then oil, and even gold. Not that you need gold, as the New World currency is now made up of strong and sturdy 2x4s. You can basically do this forever, until you finally have enough money to buy out an actually functional company. Or at least until some Poindexter decides to actually double check to see if you really do have a Philosopher's Stone in your basement. Now, if you were paying attention to my comment earlier about a stock market and the one about buying out your competitors, you're probably asking yourself,
wait, is the stock market actually functional enough to buy out your rivals?
And the answer to that question is a resounding, please hold all your questions until the end of the presentation. We'll get to that in due time. But first, a word from our sponsor. Do you enjoy sleek aesthetics? Do you like calling your friends and family to catch up with them and see how they're doing? Do you need a device that lets you browse memes on your preferred social media platform of choice? Do you like owning a working phone? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you're sure to be disappointed because you won't find it here. At Friendly Neighborhood Conglomerate Inc., we're dedicated to bringing you the absolute worst products on the market. And as far as you know, we're the only market, because we also own all the media stations. We purposefully deny any and all airtime to our competitors, so that you will tolerate our trash as you won't know any better. Ignorance is bliss, the new piece of junk 2021, now only $420.69. Act fast and you can get a free waifu. In Capitalism 2, marketing and R&D are the two most important pillars to actually competing in the market. Rather than just inventing a smartphone and calling it a day, you also have to spend time and money refining your product to maintain your market dominance. And once that's done, you must then advertise to the world so that everyone knows how great your product is. After all, it doesn't matter how good a product is if no one knows about it. For example, are you aware that in 1928, penicillin was discovered and was a watershed moment in human history, advancing our understanding of medicine? And do you know what else was discovered in 1928? Sliced bread. QED. In order to make money, you have to spend money. In order to maintain market dominance, you must spend even more money. If you ever find yourself playing this game and a few years in, you're swimming in cash and have no idea what to spend it on, throw it into the money-sucking black holes that are R&D and marketing. You'll thank me later. Now, I can see the apes gathering in the distance.
Tell us about the stock market. You spent so much time hyping it up. Tell us now, you dirty hedgie.
And with this increase in revolutionary activity, I think now is the perfect time to come clean about something very important. And I know we just met and that this is an awful way to start out our parasocial relationship, but the truth is, none of this footage is from Capitalism 2. It's all from Capitalism Lab, and while it's based off of Capitalism 2, it isn't really the same because Capitalism Lab is essentially a developer-built fork of the game that was released in 2013 with new content and is still in active development with new expansions releasing about once every other year, kind of like a Paradox game. If Paradox found multiplayer too bothersome and just ripped it out and said, go play an older and worse version of the game if you wanted it. Now, I hope that you can forgive me and that this has not caused a permanent breach in trust. I would say I will never lie like this to you again, but that would be a lie, so why bother, eh? On to the really important bits. We've discussed how to get raw resources, we've discussed how to develop and then advertise your products, but we've somehow neglected to cover how to produce and actually sell those products. You see, after you extract the precious resources from Mother Earth, you must then ship them to a factory full of wage slaves to begin the actual production process. You're then prompted to play a little minigame where you set up the factory production chain. A minigame that you should only bother with if you really have nothing better to do with your time, as the game very helpfully has multiple lists of production layouts for each possible item. After this is done, you then have to ship them out to a store to sell it to the consumers. Now, if you're a dirty casual who is not fit for the business world, the game helpfully has a setting where there is only one type of store, the Walmart, where you can sell any and all products you produce in one easy-to-use location. But If you truly love wealth and squeezing every penny out of people's wallets, you will instead have access to specialty stores, forcing you to focus on specific industries to stay competitive. If you want to sell TVs, you will need to build an electronics storefront. If you want to sell furniture, you'll need to move into the abandoned Art Van Center down the road. If, however, you want to wear big boy pants and play hardcore without specializing, there is a discount megastore that you can use instead. However, you will suffer the consequences for your hubris, for you dared to take on a challenge that you were clearly not ready for. Your grave will have been dug by yourself. And now, finally, you may put your pitchforks down, as we are now at the part of the game that takes capitalism to a lab from a great game to a timeless gem. Because no other game has anything even close to comparison to capitalism's stock market, those phone-based gambling apps notwithstanding. The stock market in this game hit me as a preteen in the mid-2000s like opioids hit America during the same time frame. Totally unrelated, but you can play as a pharmaceutical manufacturer in this game. Just throwing that out there. Anyways, through the stock market, you can buy and sell stock in both your own and your competitors' companies. Is your company on the verge of bankruptcy and no reputable bank wants to give you any money? Well, that's okay. Just issue new shares for a slight discount and the apes will buy that shit up. Just be careful to not lose majority control of your company, or you'll have to suffer through the ignominy that is the company you poured your heart and soul into for years, if not decades, be torn from your grasp, forcing you into a never-ending spiral of despair where you can't move on from your loss. Spend all your time from then on railing against all the changes the new CEO has introduced, until it ultimately culminates in a month-long live-stream binge-eating session where your arteries finally clog, having a stroke that paralyzes you for the rest of your life, having only not killed you for the sole reason that your burning but ultimately futile desire to turn back time and reclaim your rightful throne was powerful enough to keep your heart beating. But still, nothing will change. You're forever banished from power. You will ultimately live out the rest of your days mentally incapable of accepting the fact that there's nothing you can do, and that your days at the top of the bourgeoisie pecking order is over. Ultimately dying friendless and alone in a box under a bridge in Neo-Tokyo, from what would be called a tragic opioid overdose, if it wasn't for your past history of exploitative capitalism earning you no sympathy from the masses. On the other hand, if you ever find yourself with too much money, feel free to start a hostile takeover of your rivals and take all their stuff, including their spouse and children. You are rich after all. However, the stock market has one major and frankly unrealistic component because while the rest of the game is a libertarian's wet dream, the stock market is lorded over by the SEC. And unlike the real SEC, which generally ignores rich people, the only job that Capitalism Lab's SEC has is to monitor you 24/7. In capitalism, there is truly nothing worse than a government agency actually doing their job for once. The stock market also provides an alternative way of playing. For you see, everything we just discussed ultimately contributed something to the economy, either in goods or services, which is frankly too proletariat for us. Instead, the best way to play this game is as a hedge fund manager. By buying up rival stocks, you can not only make money, but gain control of their companies. While a hostile takeover requires 75% ownership, you only need 50% to gain control of their finances. This can quite easily trigger a chain reaction, where upon acquiring half of a rival, you immediately use their money to acquire half of another rival, and so on and so forth until you indirectly control the finances of every major corporation in the world, using your genius market prowess to cement your newfound power into a lasting corporate empire that will exist until the heat death of the universe. Or at least until you accidentally issue too many shares and lose control of your company. But hey, I hear there's a pretty nice drugstore down the road. Maybe you should hit it up.